The humidity in Beaumont, Texas, on July 9th, 1999, was a physical weight, the kind of air that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel earned. It was a Friday evening, the end of a long work week at the Prudential office for 38-year-old Kimberley Langwell. At 5:30 p.m., she walked out into the shimmering heat, waving goodbye to colleagues with the casual promise to see them tomorrow. She climbed into her silver 1994 Nissan Altima, likely turning the air conditioning to its maximum setting, and drove away. She was expected at her daughter's house shortly after, but as the golden hour faded into a bruised purple twilight, the silence began to scream. Kimberley didn't show up. By 10:30 p.m., the silence was broken by the sound of police radios in the parking lot of the Echo drugstore at the corner of Dowland Road and Phelan Boulevard. There, sitting under the buzzing amber glow of the streetlights, was Kimberley's car. It was perfectly parked, but the scene inside was a haunting tableau of a life interrupted. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse and her cell phone were sitting on the passenger seat untouched. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass and no blood. Just an empty seat where a mother, a friend, and a hard-working woman should have been. Kimberley Langwell had vanished into the thick Texas night, leaving behind a mystery that would freeze the blood of Beaumont residents for the next quarter of a century. In the immediate aftermath, the Beaumont Police Department launched a massive search, but the trail was cold before it even began. Every investigator knows the first 48 hours are critical. Yet as those hours bled into days, the lack of forensic evidence was staggering. There were no witnesses to her leaving the car, no surveillance footage in an era before every corner was watched by a digital eye. However, the shadow of suspicion didn't take long to fall. It landed squarely on the shoulders of Terry Hyami, a man Kimberley had been in a tumultuous relationship with for some time. Their history was a roadmap of red flags, arguments, controlling behavior, and a recent painful breakup. Kimberley had finally found the strength to walk away. But in the world of true crime, the moment of departure is often the most dangerous. Investigators focused their attention on the 800 block of Carroll Street, where Hyami lived in a modest home with a detached garage. They interviewed him, searched the property, and even brought in cadaver dogs. The dogs sniffed the air, they circled the backyard, and they lingered near the garage, but they couldn't provide the hit needed for a warrant to tear the place apart. Hyami remained stoic, his face a mask of practiced indifference. Without a body, without a weapon, and without a confession, the case stalled. For the next 25 years, the case of Kimberley Langwell became a ghost story, told in low voices. Her daughter, Tiffany McInnes, grew from a teenager into a woman, then a mother herself, all while carrying the crushing weight of the unknown. Tiffany became the architect of her mother's memory, refusing to let the file be buried in the archives. She organized vigils. She spoke to every new detective assigned to the cold case, and she kept the pressure on the Beaumont Police Department. Year after year, the anniversary of July 9th was marked by a fresh plea for information. Meanwhile, Terry Hyami lived his life. He walked the same streets, shopped at the same stores, and eventually moved out of the house on Carroll Street, selling it to an unsuspecting new owner. To the world, he was just another aging man in the neighborhood. But to the detectives who kept Kimberley's photo on their desks, he was the one that got away. The psychological toll on the community was profound. There was a killer among them, a man who had seemingly committed the perfect crime, leaving a family in a state of permanent, agonizing limbo. The shift happened in the spring of 2024, Investigative techniques had evolved far beyond what was available in 1999, and a new generation of detectives decided to apply 21st century science to a 20th century tragedy. They received a tip, the details of which remain closely guarded, that suggested they hadn't looked deep enough. Literally, on June 13th, 2024, a convoy of unmarked vehicles and heavy equipment descended once again on that quiet block of Carroll Street. The current residents were asked to step aside as the police moved toward the garage. This time they weren't just looking at the surface. They brought in ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. GPR works by sending pulses of high-frequency radio waves into the ground or through structures like concrete. These waves bounce back when they hit an object or a change in density, creating a digital map of what lies beneath. As the technician moved the radar unit across the concrete floor of the garage, the screen began to show a distinct anomaly. It wasn't a pipe or a structural beam. It was a disturbance in the earth, roughly the size of a human being, trapped beneath 6 inches of weathered Texas concrete. The air in the garage was stale and hot as the work began. The rhythmic, violent percussion of jackhammers shattered the silence of the neighborhood. A brutal sound for a brutal task. It took hours of methodical work, chipping away at the past. Detectives and forensic anthropologists stood by, their faces tight with anticipation and dread. As the last layer of concrete was pried away and the soil beneath was carefully brushed aside, the truth finally emerged. Wrapped in a layer of plastic, hidden away in a shallow grave that had been sealed with a fresh pour of cement 25 years ago, were the remains of Kimberley Langwell. The discovery was visceral. The smell of the earth, the sight of the carefully concealed evidence, and the sudden, overwhelming realization that she had been there all along. For a quarter of a century, as the world moved on, as her daughter cried herself to sleep, as the seasons changed and the city grew, Kimberley was just a few feet beneath the wheels of parked cars and the footsteps of residents. The arrest of Terry Hayami followed shortly after. Now an older man, the stoicism he had maintained for decades finally crumbled in the face of forensic reality. The charges were clear: murder. The narrative of that night finally began to assemble itself. It wasn't a disappearance. It was a calculated execution followed by a cold-blooded concealment. He had killed her, driven her car to the Eckerd parking lot to create a false trail, and then returned home to bury her in his own garage, confident that his DIY tomb would hold forever. He had bet on the limitations of the law and the passage of time, but he hadn't accounted for the stubbornness of a daughter's love or the relentless march of technology. Tiffany McInnes stood before the cameras after the news broke, her face a map of exhaustion and relief. She had spent 9,105 days waiting for this moment. Justice in this case isn't a happy ending. It's a long overdue accounting. It doesn't bring back the missed birthdays, the graduations, or the simple joy of a mother's hug. But it does strip away the power of the killer. The story of Kimberley Langwell is no longer a mystery. It is a testament to the fact that no amount of concrete can permanently bury the truth. The Texas sun still beats down on Beaumont, and the humidity still clings to the air. But on Carroll Street, the ground is finally quiet. The secret is out, the grave is empty. And Kimberley Langwell, after 25 years in the dark, has finally been brought into the light.